as nervous as you are.
Nah.
Probably more so. Hi, and welcome to Probeline. I'd like to thank the good people down at the thrift shop for sponsoring us and giving Probeline the opportunity to be able to spend some time with candidates who are running for office this fall and giving you a chance to get to know them better. And today we're going to be talking with Kelly McNicholas Kury, who is a candidate for County Commissioner. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Reed. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time.
Sure, absolutely.
So, you're running unopposed in District 3.
District 2.
District 2. So maybe in a few sentences you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be a county commissioner.
Sure. Well, my whole career has been in public service, and I thought maybe at some point in my life I might run for public office, and I didn't ever really have a clear idea of when that would be. So earlier this year, when this opportunity became clear and I realized that I lived within District 2 in Pitkin County, I started to give it more serious consideration for a lot of reasons, to become more deeply involved in Pitkin County. Also, to really put myself kind of in the hot seat. And I've always had high expectations of elected officials, and to hold myself to those high expectations for our community as well. And I just would like to be clear, all Pitkin County voters vote on all county races.
Right.
So I have to live in the district, but voters will have the opportunity to vote whether they live.
Voting.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So why do you want to be a commissioner then? What was appealing about being a commissioner?
Well, Pitkin County, really engages on a very broad spectrum of issues and topics, and I've worked for Pitkin County for the last 5 years as the election manager in the elections department most recently. And, I've loved that job. I've loved working for Pitkin County as an organization. In that role, however, I've felt that I've needed to be very neutral in my associations, which is appropriate, I think, in that position. But, I also have a background in advocacy and working in politics, and I just thought it was maybe time to try something new and try to engage and express my voice and my perspective a bit more broadly, and to engage on the issues that I really care about.
Yeah.
And so that required me to have some real serious thought about if staying in the election manager position would allow me to continue to do that, or if I could better offer my skills and talent elsewhere. So that's why I started thinking about the commissioner role in particular. And there's some big issues coming down the pipe for the county that I think is going to require some thoughtful and intensive public engagement. And in my background, I've done a lot of grassroots and community organizing, and I've enjoyed it immensely, and wanted to bring those two together. And so that's one of the reasons that I decided to run.
What are some of those issues you see coming down the pike for the county?
Well, the airport is, obviously a big, huge issue with long-standing impact for the county. I think the Carbondale to Crested Butte Trail is another one to consider. And those are just kind of big-scale stuff. The county is engaging on a climate action plan, which is, maybe past due, but also very timely, and that's something that I want to work on to make it as strong as we can.
Yeah. So. And you've been in the county about 5 years?
That's right. Yeah, I moved up here to take my job in the elections department.
Yeah. And during that period of time, what have you seen change in the county? Has it been for the better, the worse, not at all, or?
Well, no, I think a lot of things, have changed in the county. I think some of the culture organizationally of the county has moved maybe towards more of a small town, kind of family culture feel to a professional organization type feel internally. With that, I think that there's been challenges for growth and modernization that the county has had to deal with, and I think is going to continue to have to deal with as well.
Great.
Yeah.
So if you're elected, well, you're going to be elected since you're unopposed, but when you're elected, what do you think you'd like to accomplish?
Well, some of the issues that are on the forefront for me are seeing how the county can get more engaged, particularly in affordable housing. You know, the county obviously has had a long history since the very beginning of APSHA in working on that issue. I think maybe the focus recently has been on institutional needs rather than community needs, and there's some real indicators with, you know, community health surveys, et cetera, that inability to make ends meet is a real struggle and stress for our community, and I'd like to see Pitkin County, you know, get more engaged on fulfilling that community need. There's obviously a lot of also a lot of dialogue about the health of APSHA and its ability to function efficiently. That I'd like the county to play a big role in, you know, what sort of the next version of APSHA's governance and leadership might look like, and so that's an issue for me. I'd like to take a big role on. Another one is daycare, you know, child care provision. There's a real infant care crisis in Pitkin County that, you know, my husband and I have a 20-month daughter who her name is Bridget, and, you know, we understand the struggle to try and place new young children in childcare.
Right.
You know, we were lucky to be placed in Basalt when it was time for me to go back to work full time, and you know, we jumped at that opportunity. And then when we were given an opportunity for 3 days a week here at the Yellow Brick, you know, we thought we'd hit the jackpot because it's so difficult to find. And so I know at our provider there's 50 families on the waiting list trying to place children, and you know, I want to see how the county, if there's a scope for the county to play a bigger role in solving that, either looking at, you know, how do we include that in land use planning? How do we include that as part of a, you know, impact assessment? You know, how do we work in the you know, with our Mid-Valley partners to expand that as well? So those are two of the issues that I care about. I'm also, you know, I come from a background of environmental advocacy. I'd worked for the Sierra Club for several years back east, you know, and I worked heavily on water policy and land use planning, and you know, I'm excited that the new open space charter that was passed 2 years ago has expanded to include best available science, and I think a better focus on you know, wildlife and wilderness protection. And so, you know, that's something I want to look at. Where do impairments exist, and let's focus on bringing those, you know, up to better health. I think, you know, most of Pitkin County is federal lands, and we have great relationships with our federal land partners, but I also think that, you know, we're the nearest neighbors to these federal lands, and we're the stewards for everyone in this country who wants to, you know, who owns this land, who wants to be visitors to this land, and how can we best be stewards not just for our immediate community, but for that resource that everyone owns as a whole. So, you know, that I mentioned the climate action planning that the county's engaging on.
Very little conversation has come up in the cycle or even the dialogue with the commission about climate action or climate plans, and it's curious to think about how Pitkin County can play a role in that. You know.
Yeah, and they are starting, I think, to have some of that dialogue. There's been some recent conversation, you know, with the REMP fees, and maybe looking at, you know, what are the impacts as buildings and houses get bigger. You know, it's not a one-to-one, it's actually exponential factors for what those impacts are, and realigning maybe that fee scale to match that, I think is one part of the discussion. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity, you know, also for Pitkin County to kind of engage at state level on different policies that, you know, we'd like to see our legislature pass to empower us locally to do more as well. So.
Can I cycle back for a second? You
Sure,
were talking
of
about
course,
APSHA, the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority,
Right.
and how it has a more institutional focus. rather than a community focus. Can you help me understand that?
Sure. So what I mean by that is I think Pitkin County's focus on affordable housing has been on its institutional needs. So for
the county
provision
itself.
for the county, for county staff,
Right.
you know, recruitment and retention of county employees, rather than working on provision of affordable housing for community needs. So that statement was focused more on the county's engagement on the
Okay.
affordable housing issue rather than APSHA's.
Do you feel like the county has kind of backed out of housing a little bit?
No,
In the-
I mean,
yeah.
you know, they don't have as many resources, you know, and I think maybe it's time for the county to start discussing if, you know, do we need a permanent dedicated fund that comes from the county to help with the provision of that, you know, particularly as Aspen gets more built out. You know, what are we going to do in the next phase of trying to provide and bring online
Right.
additional affordable housing? So, you know, that's the direction that I think I'd like to see the county strengthen.
Great. And you'd also mentioned daycare, and there's Kids First and
Right.
various programs. So how could Pitkin County be more active in that?
Yeah, so that's my question as well. How can
Yeah.
Pitkin County, you know, I've gotten some reaction where it's like, well, Pitkin County is not really a player. And, you know, and that may be the case, but what are the opportunities to be, you know, better players? And again, is that working with Mid-Valley partners, because that's where a lot of, you know, our community is commuting from. And, you know, are there opportunities for us in, you know, there's not much new building coming that's able to happen here, but are there ways that we can help try and say, if you're creating an impact, you know, how do we also mitigate for that? I mean, I live in Burlingame housing, and you know, I didn't live in the community at the time that was planned and made, and you know, we're so fortunate. And my husband calls it breeding game because there's so many kids there, you know, and it almost seems like if we could go back and redo this, should we have made provision for some sort of childcare in that neighborhood, given the planning that entailed to bring so many kids, you know, into the community. So, you know, just keeping those things in mind and, identifying some paths to address that.
So when you become a county commissioner, how will you define your success? I mean, what do you think the particular challenges are of that job?
Yeah. You know, the county is there. The culture of the county, I don't think, is identical everywhere. So, for example, I think there's sort of very different interests and needs along the Crystal River Valley than maybe there are in parts of the Roaring Fork Valley. And, you know, I recognize being an elected official as being part of a very messy process. And so for me, I think I would define success as being able to, like, very sincerely and thoroughly engage all perspectives and, you know, make what I think is a honest and a well-defended decision on, you know, anything that comes before me. And that's how I would, you know, perceive success. I don't see, you know, you're not going to be friends, you're not going to make everybody happy. I don't expect to make everybody happy, but I do want to always treat everyone fairly. And I do want to always do my homework and be thorough in trying to see issues from all the relevant angles. And, you know, I think I've tried to do that. I sit on the Aspen Planning and Zoning Commission, and you know, we've had some hot topics that have come through there, and some decisions that, you know, I haven't been really pleased with what the outcome is, but I feel like they're defensible and you know, have been thoroughly thought through, and that's what I kind of hope to carry forward in my role as a commissioner. So, you know, I hope to always be approachable and available, and that people feel like they're being sincerely heard and included by me.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is that for the commission to do something or go in a particular direction, there needs to be 3 votes.
Right.
You know, to be able to get along with that group of people and move it forward in a public setting. Have you had an opportunity? Well, it's interesting to hear that you are on the Planning and Zoning Commission, but what about other opportunities where you've been 5 cats in a bag to try and figure out how to move forward.
Sure. You know, that really is the biggest role that I've played. Again, that's for the city, in the city of Aspen, not for,
Right.
you know, Pitkin County. I mean, I've engaged internally in Pitkin County on some groups where we've tackled some real internal policy and procedural issues for the county and improving the function of that organization. So I've done that type of work as well. But yeah.
What do you find most rewarding about that kind of group dynamic?
Well, you know, we have such incredibly talented, smart, you know, I think thoughtful people who are worldly and, you know, bring a lot of different perspectives to the table. And, you know, so that trade-off and, you know, the bouncing off of ideas, I think, you know, just let's open the box and see what all we can pull out. I find that to be a really valuable part of the process. You know, I've been sort of warned a little bit of, okay, you know, all of your discussions and all of your, you know, decision making is going to be on TV and including work sessions and you know, I just sort of want to overcome that a little bit and still be able to say, well, what might seem crazy, and, you know, are there pieces of ideas that could be practical and applicable, you know, for problems here in the county. So, you know, I enjoy that filtering through
kind of
and that
give and take,
yeah,
the dialogue
exactly,
of it.
exactly.
Well, you know, it seems like the lens through which the county views a lot of issues is growth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are defined as pro-growth or anti-growth or no growth or they have growths or something. But, you know, where do you kind of fit on that spectrum, or how you see yourself as a manager of growth?
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, I think the feedback I've gotten in conversations with people, you know, in Pitkin County, you know, residents in Pitkin County is, you know, there is some no growth attitude, and then there is also some acceptable growth attitude. You know, I don't think that Pitkin County ever has like a fast track perspective on growth. And, you know, again, in my prior work, when I did grassroots and community organizing and lobbying for the Sierra Club, you know, I had a lot of interaction on a lot of growth topics, and this was back in New Jersey, which in many areas has a very fast track growth perspective to it. So these are, you know, these are value conflicts that are going to go on forever, you know, for my 4-year term and beyond. And so the lens that I see it in, again, is, you know, I want to be very thoughtful and informed about it, again, because I do think we are surrounded by public lands. I want to see that our wilderness lands are retained as pristine. I think that there are some real suburbanization factors happening right around these wilderness areas that, you know, I have concerns about, honestly. You know, I think we need to, for me, I look through the lens of, okay, so how do we make decisions that retain and improve the health of those wilderness, and any encroachment upon them is, you know, a real lens that I would look at decisions that come before me in.
What might be an example of the suburbanization that you're talking about?
Well, I think that, you know, there's a lot of push for recreation. We're all recreationalists around here. You know, I'm an avid hiker and backpacker, and I just think we need to keep that in balance as well. So, you know, that's a concern for me. And again, I think that because the Open Space Charter has opened up to require looking at best available science, that we have a commitment to use and obtain best available science. So that's something that I know will always be a check when I'm reviewing issues, is did we overcome that? You know, did we successfully achieve that threshold?
Great.
Yeah.
You know, again, in the kind of growth context, the airport, as you've mentioned, is one of the issues that's really coming before the board.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts about the planning that's going on at the airport, or how it fits into our next phase?
Sure. So, I will say, you know, I'm excited to to engage on the airport issue because learning anything about airport design operations is going to be a real learning curve for me. You know, some issues I feel like at least I bring a little bit of background engagement, but I'm coming at this with like a real novice perspective and kind of open book. So I think that, you know, there's always going to be that question of how is this critical resource serving the community? You know, it is without a doubt a significant part of the economic engine that, you know, functions in our community. And I think it'll be helpful to kind of keep that in the forefront of our reminders, but to also you know, to also honestly assess, like, how is this fitting into our community rather than having that one step removed as an economic engine.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to see really some direct linkages between, okay, like, this is something that all people are all users of as we move forward in the planning for that. And, you know, I see it as an issue that we're dealing with now, and you know, there's some push to, well, why are we dealing with it now when it could have been dealt with in 5 years? And you know, we need to deal with it, you know, at some point. And we also need to do it very thoughtfully because there's going to be a limit to anything that happens at the airport. You know, it's not DIA where it's just surrounded by annexed land that can continue to grow. I mean, it has some very clear restrictions and delineations to what that can look like.
Yeah.
So I don't, you know, what we do now, I don't think necessarily means like, okay, now we're opening a slate for the rest of the, you know, the rest of the future of the airport. So I don't know. I mean, I do think that as far as like the growth issues are concerned, you know, I'm not sure how much that the airport is going to cause additional growth in the community. You know, this is a real issue that I'd like to understand because particularly having worked in planning and been on planning and zoning in Aspen, there's this constant discussion about loss of bed base and, you know, retaining small lodges and, you know, there's limiting factors
Right.
that
in many ways are about the character of the community.
Exactly.
You know, what kind of community we are.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so the airport I think is going to be a very crucial issue and something that I personally, you know, want to ensure that there's a very robust and authentic public engagement process on. Yeah.
Well, and you know, it is all part of that growth context, which for me raises a couple questions that I'm curious to know how you think about them. And one is the role of the county in conjunction with the city. You know, that how do these two bodies work together to help manage our larger community? And there's always this give and take or tug and pull between the two elected bodies. And with your experience on the City Planning Commission, any thought of how to do that, how to make that work for citizens?
Well, I think, you know, we owe it to everyone who lives here to have strong relationships, you know, between the two boards. You know, I do think APSHA is sort of a representation of where maybe that has fizzled and has an opportunity to re-strengthen. And again, where I would like to be part of that re-strengthening. You know, there's also a real push for some regional perspective on issues too. You know, so not just between the city and the county, but also the rest of the valley and where can we, you know, all work together and collaborate on certain things. So I think that it's essential. I think that's just kind of a little bit of a new world that we're in, and that tension's not going to go away, or that demand is not going to go away. So I think it's important for elected officials to, you know, make that a priority. You know, I like to think I have good relationships, at least with the city, you know, staff and officials that I've always engaged, and I hope that continues when I start my new role.
Right.
So, yeah.
And inevitably, people talk about the entrance to Aspen.
Yeah.
You know, and I've only been in the Valley for 30-some years, and it's been going on all 30 of those years. But, you know, it does incrementally move forward. And is that something that you've thought about how you feel about it coming in from Burlingame and
Sure.
or
And when
connecting
you
to the
say
line.
moving forward, you mean the path to move it across Meralt? Is that?
No, it's just that you know, at one time it was a 2-lane road, then it became a 4-lane road with some roundabouts, you know, and things keep evolving
Sure.
almost inevitably, but we're again at a point where traffic is becoming an exceptional problem.
Sure.
You know, and I think there's a lot of implications as to how we move forward with more cars or more buses or rails or the airport. Where does the airport fit in? All of those puzzle pieces that are so complicated and tend to make it difficult to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be an intractable issue. But, you know, maybe it's reached its set point in the sense that nobody's happy and unhappy enough with that solution. So as far as the entrance to Aspen, you know, I'm not sure what I stand on that. I mean, I wouldn't advocate for crossing Burrell at this point. You know, I think looking for better solutions to move people along what currently exists. And again, when it comes to roads, I definitely have a point of view of, you know, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Perspective. So expanding roads is never kind of my first. The
Yeah,
first
it
place
seems
I
like
go
it
as a solution.
doesn't get you out of the problem.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't seem that way, and yeah, and it hasn't been my experience. You know, again,
Yeah.
working in New Jersey, where that has been the solution and hasn't solved the problems in the past. So, I wouldn't necessarily apply that here, but you know, there do seem to be some like underutilized resources. You know, Buttermilk parking lot. You know, it's there and it's never used.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about the location of that park and ride that isn't going to solve the problem. You know, so I think we need to unpack some assumptions about what people want. And you know, it's gotten a little bit of a bad name, I think, this year with efforts to expand the bridge and all the Castle Creek Bridge and all that.
We only have a couple minutes left,
Oh, sure.
and I want to make sure that you have a chance to kind of say what you think is important or want to get across. But I have one more question.
Okay.
Which is, let's say you know you're going to be elected, and we're at Probeline now. It's 4
Yes.
years down the road, and you're running for your second term.
Yes.
Because you've loved being a commissioner so much. What do you want to be able to brag about having accomplished in those 4 years?
I would like to be able to, you know, brag about having accomplished taking some real steps towards solutions on climate change, at least that what we can do locally. I think, you know, I've been a clean energy advocate and an environmentalist for a long time throughout my life and my career, and you know, we need to get it done. And so now I'm putting myself in the hot seat to get that done, and that would be a real success to be able to point to some solutions and wins there.
Yeah.
I would like to see the county to be able to look back and say, hey, we helped fund and build and bring online this many new affordable housing units in the past 4 years, or we have this many that are approved and you know are awaiting construction in the last 4 years. I'd like to say, you know, we've expanded childcare capacity to at least absorb additional families or provide additional resources to support hiring more teachers and housing more teachers at our local child care providers would be, you know, some of the things that I think I would count as successes.
Well, just in the next few seconds, is there anything I missed that you'd want to say or make sure people know?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and just introduce myself. In the absence of a real campaign, you know, it's been a little bit of a struggle, and I think people rightly have, you know, the expectation to know who I am and what I stand for. And so with that, I'm always available. I'm open. I want to meet, you know, I have a couple of personal goals for myself, which is to meet as many people as I can and to walk every square inch of the county if I can. So, you know, those are aspirations that I have, and they're sincere. And so I invite the public to, you know, connect with me to participate on those.
Great.
Yeah. So,
all right. Kelly, thank you very much. It was great speaking with you.
Likewise. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, I'd like to thank the folks at the Thrift Shop for sponsoring this and for Kelly to spend her time, and hope you were able to learn something about candidates. Thank you very much.